fall in a hole and game over. We've all seen this. Let's take a look at some different ways we can put this in our game. What's up everybody, welcome to MyPixel. As always, it's awesome to have you here. So today we've just got our basic platformer up here, and we have an addition from our last time. We've got a big hole here, which is going to serve as our bottomless pit. Now, before we start, I'm going to say I'm sure that there are dozens of ways that you can go about implementing a bottomless pit, but today I'm just going to go ahead and show you 4 of them that I thought of. For option number 1 today, we're going to go ahead and use an area 2D as a trigger area. Now, if the player falls in the hole, let's say over here, and then touches the area 2D that's going to be located in or below the hole, then we can go ahead and end the game. First, we'll create a new scene here. Here we go. And then we'll start the scene off with an area 2D. Put that in there. Let's go ahead and rename it. Let's call it Pit Sensor. I think that's good enough. Okay, so to that area 2D, we're going to add a collision shape. Again, these are all 2Ds because we're working in 2D. If you're doing 3D, then I guess you'd use collision shape instead. But we're using a collision shape 2D. And then for the shape, we're going to go ahead and add a rectangle shape. We'll do that here. New rectangle shape. If we go ahead and zoom in on it here, if we had a sprite, I'd usually use pixel snap and then go about resizing it to fit the sprite over here. But since there's no sprite, it's just going to be an empty space that you can't even see. We're just going to go ahead and click here, and then we can set our extents. So I'm going to go ahead and set the extents to 32 by 16. Okay. After that, let's go ahead and give it a quick save. So just scene, or scene, save scene as. It's going to give it the name here. Pit sensor is fine, exactly what we named our root node there. So we'll say save. Now that we have that, we're going to go ahead and add a script, right? Because we need this to do something. So we add a script. Create. Let's go ahead and just get rid of some of this junk in here. I like to leave the ready function just in case. We're not even going to use it today, so feel free to delete it if you want. But I'm going to start it off like that. Okay, and now that we have that there, or now that we have the script here, now we're able to add, start using some of the signals. So for the area 2D, we're going to use the signal here, body entered. Right? If we don't have a script and we try and connect this signal, we don't have anything to connect it to. So we created a script on the pit sensor here. Then we're going to connect the signal. So we can just double click it, body entered. Make sure that make function is on, and then we'll go to connect. I'll put this in here. Now, real simple. All we're going to do here is when the character touches the area, we're just going to have it reset our game. So to do that is very easily get tree, reload current scene, and that's it. So we'll save that. Also, one last thing we're going to need to do is because this project makes use of collision layers. If you're not familiar with the collision layers or what the work that we've done on that, you can go ahead and check out, I think it's 2 episodes back, but there's an episode on collision layers. And that's where we did the groundwork for this initially, or some of these other items here. So we're going to go ahead and this pit sensor, we don't want it to be in the hero layer. We want it to exist in the environment layer. So we're just going to go ahead and select that. We'll unselect hero. Whoops. Get back in there. And then as far as the mask, right? Once again, the mask is where we're looking for collisions. we only want this sensor to collide with the hero, right? We don't care about the enemies, we don't care about stages, fireballs, or anything like that. So the mask needs to be set to the hero layer, right? So once again, we've got this area 2D that exists in the environment layer, and it will be looking for collisions with the hero. Okay, so that's all good. Let's do a quick save. Now that we have that set up, we can get back into our stage 1 scene and go ahead and pull that sensor into the scene. So we'll go ahead and grab this scene down here, this TSCN file, and we can just go ahead, click and drag, and we'll pull it in here. I suppose there's no need to get really precise or anything like that, but so just get it someplace under there, underneath that hole. Again, I like to use the pixel snap, so it snaps in a nice whole pixel increments. Alright, so someplace below the hole. And now that we have that set up, then we should be able to run this, and it should work out. Let's see. Alright, let's run through our stage. Jump over hole just to start, fall in the hole, and alright, well, it reset. That looks good. How about we try one more time just for good measure? Jump straight up and down into the hole. Great. That's exactly what we need. So we'll just jump out of our game there. Alright, so everything worked great, but there is one thing to note. One drawback that I can see immediately to this approach is the fact that you're going to manually have to place these sensors anytime or anywhere you have a pit. In this example, we've only got one pit, so it went pretty quick. But let's say you got a pit here, another one here, another one there. You could have them all over the place, right? The more pits you have, then the more of these you're going to have to manually place, which could get a little bit tedious. But if that kind of thing doesn't bother you, then I think this is a really good, straightforward way to implement the bottomless pit. Now moving on, we're going to take a look at option 2 here, where we're going to use a visibility notifier. What this is going to do is it's just going to let us know when the player has left our site, or more specifically left the game camera site. Right? So if it left the game camera site, in that case it must mean that he fell in the hole. Before we go ahead and get started with that, we're just going to go ahead and grab this pit sensor, and we're just going to slide it out of the way so that we can properly test out our visibility notifier, right? Our option 2 here. We can always go with this on the side. Instead of deleting it, it's just on the side. It doesn't bother anything, and that way we can quickly drag it back into place if we want to use it again. So let's go ahead and add that visibility notifier. Let's do a quick save. Jump into our hero. That's where we're going to stick it. So with the hero selected here, let's go ahead and add a new node. Visibility notifier 2D. Alright. We can just go ahead and adjust the size of the visibility notifier. There's no need to get completely precise or anything like that here. For the purposes of this pit, it's really not that important. If you're doing hitboxes and stuff like that, you want to be a little bit more precise, but for this purpose, I think that's good enough. Go ahead and save that. Next, we're going to need to go ahead and connect the signal from the visibility notifier. So with that selected, jump into this node tab here, and we're going to use a screen exited signal. So let's go ahead and connect that to the hero. Connect, and then we've got this little block of code here. Now this one real simple, just like the last one. All we did when the character falls in the pit, we're just going to reset the game. So effectively, when this signal hits, that's like he fell in the pit. So once again, we're just going to go ahead and put the code in to reset the game. Get tree, reload current scene, and that's it. Save that there, and then we can jump back into our stage 1 scene, give it a quick look over, and then run our game and see if everything works. Alright, let's go ahead and test this out here. Right over here, fall in the hole. Cool, it resets. Alright, let's try that one more time. I always like to try again, just to make sure it wasn't a fluke. Good. Alright, and because this is working off the visibility notifier, it should work actually whenever we fall in any pit. Right now I don't have another pit to test. At the end of the stage, technically, there's a pit here. The stage just ends. So if I fall off over here, or I mean, it's gonna reset the game as soon as I run off the screen anyway. But right, that would work also. Cool. Now this method will work as long as you have your game camera set to not move past a certain y-axis value. If your camera is set to follow the player unconditionally, your player will never leave the view of the camera and your visibility notifier signal will never trigger. That's just something to keep in mind. So let's just say you have something like, yeah, maybe if the camera, like our camera, it won't follow us into the hole. If your camera is set to follow you into the hole and keep following you down as you fall off the screen, if your character never leaves the view of the game, or if your player never leaves the view of the game camera, then this method is not going to work for you. But provided that when you fall on a bottomless pit, it's someplace where your camera will not follow, then this method should work just fine. Now for option 3, we're going to go ahead and track the location of the player on the y-axis. When the player's coordinates pass a certain, or when the player exists beyond a specified y value, we will know that he fell in the hole. So first thing we're going to go ahead and do, we'll go back into our hero, going back into our script. We're going to go ahead and comment out this line so that it doesn't interfere with the testing of our new method. I'm just going to add a pass statement back in here so that it stops complaining and won't throw an error. This way, this code exists in here. If we want to go back to it, we can always just uncomment this, no problem. Now that we have that, let's get right in here right at the end of all our movement code. If we actually scroll up here, we're inside of our physics process. There's all the code for controlling the character, gravity, everything like that, how it moves. After all that is done, so after the character has moved, now we want to perform this check. But first, let's see. We're going to need to find a y coordinate value to actually use. So let's jump back into the stage here. Let's zoom in. Let's zoom in and let's find the bottom of this pit. Okay, so the bottom of the pit is here. If we follow it across, here we'll get to our rulers. I don't know if you can see this. It's pretty small, but the nearest large number they got on the ruler over here is 400. So your y coordinate 400 exists right here. If our player passes this point, I think it's safe to say that he fell in the hole. So let's go ahead and use that, 400. Let's zoom back out. Go back into the hero, to the script. All right. So here we go, the code. So we'll say if position.y is greater than 400. Why don't we just do greater than or equal to? I don't know. It really doesn't make a difference at this point. But so if position.y is greater than or equal to 400, then we're just going to reset the game. Right, get tree, reload current scene. And that's pretty much all we need. So let's go ahead and save. I like to always jump back into my stage so I can see everything. And let's run it, see if it works. Here. Jump in here, jump up here, fall in the hole. Fantastic, that works. And then similar to the last one, if we run off the edge of a stage and we fall down, we are going to fall down. If we just keep running, we'll fall down. And then the game will end, right? And then that's because if you didn't see the end of the stage, the camera will only scroll and then it will snap It'll only run up to here. So when we run off the edge, we fall down just like this is another bottomless pit. So it's basically the same thing. So that works also. Now, one drawback to this method is that if you have a stage that starts very high up but then moves down as the stage progresses. For example, maybe your character goes down a long staircase, right? It starts way up high, descends this long staircase dramatically or something like that. If it's going to do that, you're going to need to do some tweaking to be able to use this method, since your player might end up going beyond the y-axis threshold that you might have set earlier in the stage. So what I'm just trying to say is, if you say this is 400, right? If I drop below 400, then I should end the game. Let's say we had a staircase here that went down, like a set of stairs. This is a valid place for the player to be, but it's already past the 400 threshold. So then it's going to cause your game to end or whatever you programmed it to do. Right? So that wouldn't be too good. So just something to keep in mind, that you're going to need to place this or use this method carefully depending upon your stage design. Now for our last option today, option 4, we're going to go ahead and track the y-axis velocity. Now, due to the acceleration from the gravity, the player will fall faster and faster as time goes on. So once the player has increased to a certain speed or a certain velocity, we can safely assume that he has fallen way too long to have fallen off a normal platform. And then we can decide that, well, then that means he must have fell down the hole. And then we'll go ahead and end the game. Now, I'm not quite sure, but I think it was maybe some version of Grand Theft Auto I played a long time ago that worked something like this. I think you jumped off like this really tall building, and eventually your character would go into the death animation, even though he was miles away from the ground. So, something kind of like that. I'm not sure if that's the exact method they use, but it reminded me of that. So again, before we get started on this method, we need to comment out our code from the last method so it's not getting in the way. Just go ahead and comment that out. And for this one, we're just going to put our new code right under it. It's pretty easy. Now, before I go ahead and do this, just a quick little note. Some of the values I'm going to use here, it's going to probably actually take you some testing within your games personally to find the specific velocity value that's going to work well for your situation. I've done my testing previously, so I already have a value that I know works well. That being said, here's that value in the code. So we'll say if velocity.y is greater than 1200, then we're going to reset the game. And that's it, right? So we commented out the last code, so we know that that's not doing the work for us. So now we're going, whereas last time we went off the position, or y position on the screen, now we're going off our y velocity. Right, a quick save, jump back in here, and run our game and see if it works. Okay, jump in here. Alright, so we'll do it again. I'm not sure if any of you have noticed there, but there's this small fraction of a second that we have to wait for the game to reset. And therein lies the drawback to this approach. Now, what you have to do is you have to consider the delay that you'll have to wait for the player to reach the threshold for this y-axis velocity. So, let's say you have some very high platforms in your game. Your player might be able to fall for even something like 2 or 3 seconds maybe before finally reaching the ground. In that case, you would have to go ahead and increase your y-axis velocity threshold to something past whatever your velocity would be after falling for that 2 or 3 seconds, so that your player wouldn't accidentally die when he was performing a valid jump or a fall from some valid place that's not supposed to make him die. But then if you did that, it'll be pretty lame, because then if you jump directly in the bottomless pit, you'd actually have to wait a whole 2 or 3 seconds before you finally hit that y velocity value. So you have to be really careful with this method, but it might prove itself useful to you. Actually, just to show you really quick, well, kind of what I'm talking about. If I jump in this hole right here from that close, you see I have to wait that fraction of a second. But if I jump off a very high place, right, you see it was instantly, almost right at that instant where I left the screen is where I finally hit that velocity of 1200. That got the game to reset. So that's what I mean, right? So if you got a lot of high platforms in the game, this might not be the technique for you, but once again, it might work out. You'll just have to work that in to see if it fits your game. But as you just saw here today, there are many ways to accomplish the bottomless pit. Just which method you use will all depend on your game's design and specific needs. If you like the video, don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss out on what's coming up next. Also, the sprites, source code, and everything else that I've used in this tutorial today is available for download on my Patreon page. So if you want to check that out and also support the channel, the link will be in the description. Thanks again to everyone for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy.